My book is called The Butcher Boy, and so I'm doing a presentation about how psychopaths and serial killers, it's a nurture versus nature, where these serial killers, they killed because of how they were raised. It was the environment that they were raised in that caused them to be serial killers. So to start off, this FBI profiler, Jim Clemente, once said, "Genetics load the gun, their personality and psychology aim it, but their experiences pull the trigger." So most people believe that killers are born rather than made, and this is because they mostly look at a specific part of a person's life instead of the whole picture. And what really happens is that most of these serial killers that I'll be talking about, they actually blamed their past and like how they were brought up and like the horrible things that happened to them as a child for why they killed people. So by setting the book in Francie's point of view, he is the main character in The Butcher Boy. Patrick McCabe, he showed how the tragic events that Francie experienced in his life caused him to viciously murder his neighbor, Mrs. Nugent. And so through this, I'm going to be talking about the psychological development of children. I'll be talking about serial killers, corporate psychopaths, and of course, analyzing the book Butcher Boy. Okay, so psychological development of children. So a person is the average of 5 people they spend the most time with. And 2 of those people are obviously their parents. And parents are actually the child's first teacher. You know, the child comes in to the world knowing nothing. They grow up and they learn through experiences with their parents. And so I'm going to be talking about 4 different types of parents and how, with these different 4 types of parents, how the children grew up. So, types of parents. We have an authoritative parent. So these parents are able to communicate openly with their child. So I'm going to be using a girl named Susie, for example. So let's say that Susie steals a toy from a friend. An authoritative parent would be able to firmly reprimand her and make her apologize, but not be overcritical. So it's an equal amount of demanding and responsiveness. They know how to handle the child without being too critical of them. So studies have shown that children with these types of parents, they turn out to be more confident, and they're typically extroverted when they become older. Second type of parent is the authoritarian parent. And these parents, they represent the more demanding side, but the less responsive side. So for example, if you say Susie's parents want her to get really good grades. So Susie, of course, gets good grades, but the parents don't do anything. They don't show support when she does. They just say, okay. So children of these parents, they tend to grow up as introverts, and they have low self-esteem because their parents were not emotionally supportive. Next type of parent are the permissive parents. And these parents, they lack the disciplinary action, but they heed to the child's every wishes. So we're using Susie again. Her parents never gave her a curfew, or her parents always gave her whatever she wanted. Like she got a Jeep for her birthday, or she got just whatever Susie wanted, her parents gave her. So these children, they tend to grow up and be impulsive, reckless, and they don't have any regard for rules. And lastly, we have the neglecting, rejecting parents. These are the worst type of parents. They ignore their children and they only focus on their own needs. So for example, if Susie had a concert one night, she already knows that her parents wouldn't be there because they don't really care about what she does with her life. These children, they tend to grow up with depression, they engage in risky sexual behavior, and they misuse drugs and alcohol. So, now that you have a little background about types of parents, I'm going to look into the emotional identification that children have with their parents. So studies have shown time and time again that there is a connection between what the children see their parents do, and they imitate it. So for example, if a child witnesses parents who leash out their anger on each other and constantly fight, that child will learn to grow up they'll learn how to express their anger, express their frustration, and how to solve problems through yelling and fighting constantly. There's also a study that they had children who saw their parents beat up a doll, and then these children, they also beat up that same doll. But then there is another case where the children didn't beat up the doll, or where the parents did not beat up the doll, and the children never beat up the doll. So you see, it's a thing where you see where the children see the parents do something, and the children want to imitate it because they're their first teachers. There's also another emotional identification with fear and anger and happiness. So by the age of 4 to 5 years, children believe unconsciously that some of their attributes of their parents are part of their own. So, for example, a girl whose mother is afraid of storms and large animals, the children is tempted to assume that she too should be afraid of storms and large animals. But a mother who is not afraid of storms or not afraid of animals, that child will show that she is also not afraid of storms and large animals. Okay, now moving on to serial killers. So when people think of the word serial killers, they usually think of only the horrible crimes they're committed, which is, yeah, pretty much. But they don't look at exactly how they came to be that kind of person. They look past everything and they focus on the atrocity of the crimes instead of understanding how that person came about to killing people. And so the 3 serial killers I'll talk about today are Edmund Kemper, Eileen Wuornos, and a girl named Mary Bell. So just to make this more fun, I'm going to look at these crimes from a criminal minds point of view. So we're going to look at the victims first, analyze what we know about the victims, and see see who we can guess who it is. So, case number 1, we have 6 college girls. They were all females, all hitchhikers. They were stabbed and strangled, and then their bodies were raped. Their dead bodies were raped and dismembered. So, yeah, very, very ugly crimes. So looking at this, you can come to the conclusion that this person obviously must have hated women. He didn't kill any men, or this person did not kill any men. The person only killed women. So, you know, you're looking at it and you think, well, he must have had the charm to be able to pick up all the women, but not enough charm to be able to have sex with them, like, consensually. So you can also guess that, as I said before, that this person hated females, but because they hated females, they must have had a strong female in the past that probably abused him, and so he's lashing his anger out on them. So, next, the police get a call from a man who said he had killed his mother. What happened was he said that he had bludgeoned her to death, decapitated her, raped her head, ripped out her vocal cords, and then shoved them down the sink to shred them.
There's a Netflix special about this.
Yes. Yeah, this is Edmund Kemper. And so so when the police finally detained Edmund Kemper, they connected him with 6 other crimes with his mother, but they also found out that he had killed his grandparents previously there when he was at the age of 15. So now let's look into his life. So earlier in his life, Edmund Kemper's parents were divorced. His mother constantly emotionally abused him, and she was an alcoholic. She always blamed him for the divorce and said that Edmund Kemper was a constant reminder of her ex-husband. The mother is named Clarnell. She even, at the age of 15, she locked Ed in a basement for fear that he would rape his siblings, even though he commented that he would definitely not rape his siblings. But he was a 6'4".
Oh,
I'm taking his word for it.
I swear.
He showed signs. He decapitated his siblings' dolls, and so like his mother was a little afraid of him, so she just locked him in the basement. And during an interview, I watched a 40-minute interview. He talked about when his mom locked him in the basement, and he commented, "I had to go to bed in the basement. Why am I going to the basement? I'm going to hell. My sisters are going to heaven." So right then and there, you see how the way Clarnell treated him, that he started to have an emotional response saying, well, I'm horrible, and he started to hate his mother. He actually blamed his mother for all the killings. He said, every time I was killing those girls, I was killing my own mother. At the age of 16, he went to a mental institution after killing his grandparents. And he commented, "I missed ages 16 through 21. I'm supposed to be associating with people in their adult years, but I missed the big chunk." And again, he said he was commenting that he was killing his mother all along when he murdered those girls. And when he finally got to kill his mother, he actually said it was an impulse thought. He went up to her and she's like, "What, you want to talk?" And so he grabbed an object and he bludgeoned her to death. And then he shoved the vocal cords down the sink to permanently silence her.
Turn on
So-
the garbage disposal.
What?
Turn on the garbage disposal too.
Yes.
You gotta
Yeah.
destroy it.
All right. Case number 2. So, 7 men shot multiple times. They were all truck drivers, all found by the side of the road. They were all found without their wallets and without their cars, so we know that they were robbed. Why only male drivers? Why did they have to die? Why couldn't they just be robbed? And so we can conclude that whoever murdered these people, they must have been able to charm these men out of their trucks, and so we're guessing it's a woman if she was able to, get all these men out of the trucks. And it was probably a hitchhiker, since all of these people were truck drivers, and it was probably there was like sex offered in there, and we don't know if there was actually, if they did it before or if she had sex with them afterwards. So this is Eileen Wuornos. She was convicted on 7 counts of murder, and she was actually given the death penalty. And so we look at Eileen's childhood, and it was actually worse than Edmund Kemper's. Eileen was constantly engaged in sexual activities with her brother. Her grandfather would sexually assault her and beat her up. She also became pregnant after being raped by one of her grandfather's friend. She actually gave up the boy. We don't know where he is now. She was thrown out of her house after her grandfather found out that she was pregnant, and she began living in the woods. And so she lived in the woods for about 2 years. So she lived there when it was snowing, when it was really hot. And so during an interview with her, she said, if I had to do my life all over again, and I came from a background of a family that was right on, or that was a family of America who would have, if I could do it all over again, I would have likely become an outstanding citizen of America who would have either been an archaeologist, a paramedic, a police officer, or a fire department gal. I would have done real decent stuff. So here you see how Eileen Wuornos, she blamed her childhood. She blamed for the way she was exposed to sex, and she was exposed to the rape culture at a very young age. And so she actually commented that she robbed these men because she needed the money, and she killed them because she claimed that they were gonna come onto her sexually. She said it was out of self-defense. Okay. So, but we know that it was not self-defense, she was just, yeah. Okay, so case 3, we have 2 little boys at the age of 3 and 4. They were found strangled to death. Actually, Martin Brown, he was first ruled out as an accident initially because there were actually no marks on his throat, because whoever strangled him actually was not strong enough to leave bruising, but enough to close the airways. So the police thought it was an accident. But when they found the second boy, Brian Howe, they soon realized that there was an actual murderer on the streets. The second boy, they found puncture wounds on the calves, and so it was by some scissors, so they realized that whoever killed Brian Howe was actually trying to engrave their initials on his body. So we are looking at a girl named Mary Bell. So at a young age, she was neglected by both of her parents. Her mother was depressed and a prostitute. Her father was an alcoholic and a petty criminal. And it is in the documentary. It is said that Mary very likely saw the sexual acts that her mom engaged in with other men. She saw acts where the man would strangle the mother, or the mother would strangle the man. And so that's why that's what they think is why she strangled the boys, was because she saw how that was how her mother engaged in sexual acts with that. So according to a psychologist in the documentary, she said that, I think the relationship with Mary and her mother was the key factor to how she was. They had really little or no emotional attachment at all, and I think this made the child feel she had little or no emotional attachment to human beings around her. And what a really interesting fact about that is she was convicted of the murders, and she went into a mental institution for a while, and then she actually came out, and she got a new identity, and now she's living as a citizen in a foreign country right now. So through whatever happened to her in the mental institution, she was taught what was right and what is wrong, and she is now okay. Like, she's not murdering people anymore.
Good girl.
So now I'll go to talk about corporate psychopaths to show that not all psychopaths are serial killers. So there's not really specific evidence on this because you can't really like do a, I don't know, like a good like test on psychopaths, like corporate psychopaths, people who don't commit murders. But there are studies show that there are the psychopaths who do not commit murder. They're actually they tend to go into a really demanding job where they have a lot of power. But what is shown is that with these psychopaths, when they're in a corporate job, they tend to foster a very bad work environment where there's constant bullying. And so you can see that 5 signs your boss may be a corporate psychopath. She wants your ideas but claims them as their own. You feel manipulated, used, or conned. He or she is deluded and obviously disconnected from the reality of the office. He or she cannot show compassion, empathy, remorse, or guilt, but will sometimes try to fake them. He or she displays poor behavior control and in particular excessive impulsiveness. And 5, he or she is reluctant to take responsibility for their actions and errors and exhibits haughty self-righteousness. So, yes, so that's what a corporate psychopath looks like. So now I will be talking about Francie in the book Butcher Boy. So I'm going to introduce the characters that played an integral part in Francie's life. So first of all, himself, Francie. Then we have his best friend, Joe Purcell, his mother, Annie Brady, his father, Benny Brady, Mrs. Nugent herself, who was murdered by Francie, and Mrs. Nugent's son, Philip Nugent. So we're going to look at his murder right now. So his murder was, Mrs. Nugent was found in her home, shot in the head with her insides cut open and the word pig written all over the walls. And so now we're going to look into his childhood. So Francie's parents. His mother was a suicidal alcoholic. Francie even saw his mother almost commit suicide. In the book, Francie comes home from getting a chocolate bar, and he sees his mother with the rope and a chair and just standing looking at the ceiling about to commit suicide. And he's like, "Mom, what are you doing?" And she's like, you would never disappoint me, would you, Francie?" And his dad was an alcoholic, and he was a little bit abusive. Whenever Francie would do anything wrong, he would beat him. He was also very emotionally abusive. They both demanded so much of Francie, but they never really looked after him. He would always be able to leave. He would commit petty crimes, and the parents wouldn't do anything about it except beat him up. Now we're going on to the Nugent family. So Philip Nugent was a boy Francie's age. He actually took, in Francie's mind, he took Joe Purcell away from him. So Joe Purcell and Philip Nugent became best friends, and so that really hurt Francie because Joe was Francie's only best friend, was Francie's only friend. And then Mrs. Nugent actually called Francie a pig when he was really young, and that really, even though he doesn't really show it in his consciousness, like the book is a stream of consciousness, so we see Francie's point of view in everything. He hears Mrs. Nugent call him a pig, but the way he does it, like he has an innocence to himself where he takes it to heart, but he doesn't really show that he's affected by it, but he really is. He starts acting like a pig from then on. So now we're going to a rape. So after Francie defecated on in Mrs. Nugent's house, actually, he called himself a pig, and he said, "Well, what do pigs do? They poop everywhere." So he went to the Mrs. Nugent's house and he pooped on her carpet. Mrs. Nugent saw it, and then he was sent to a mental facility. So in this mental facility, it was run by priests, and It's really funny how it's described in the book. Like the defecation is really funny. But so he's in a mental institution, and it's run by priests. And this one priest takes a special liking to Francine, and it's really interesting how the rape is actually said in the book, because he knows he's being raped, but his innocence around it doesn't really accept the fact that he is being raped. He was raped twice by a priest, and that's actually how he got out of the institution, was because the other priest did not want the press all around this, so he said, "You can go early." And he was like, "Okay, I just won't talk about it." Okay, so lastly, he was disowned. So, before he was disowned, his mother actually did commit suicide when he was gone, and his father actually blamed him for the suicide. So that tragic event of his mother committing suicide and his father blaming him, that was a big emotional toll on him. So finally, the disownment, it was, so this is when Joe Purcell verbally disowned Francie as being his friend, and this was when Mrs. Nugent's brothers, so these are 40-year-old men, come and beat up a 10-year-old boy. And Joe is with Francie at this time, and the uncles are like, "Why are you hanging out with Francie?" And Joe said, "I'm not hanging out with him. I don't know how to get rid of him. He's not my friend." And so that is another emotional toll on Francie. And in the end, he ends up finding he's trying to put the blame on someone, because it's too much to put the blame on himself. So he blames everything on Mrs. Nugent, because he believes that when the Nugents came to town, when Joe started to become friends with Philip, it was all Mrs. Nugent's fault. She called him a pig. She made him a pig. She took Philip away from him, and it was because of his mother's suicide. It was because of Mrs. Nugent. And so this is what caused him to have a mental breakdown and kill Mrs. Nugent only. He shot her in the head, and he cut her insides open and wrote "pig" all over the house. So, the end.
Oh.